Right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. It's rather warm in here, but it's a beautiful spring-like day here in Keene, and it's good to see the warm weather here, the sun out. So, welcome. My name is James Beatty. I'm the Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs here at Keene State College, New Hampshire's public liberal arts college, a college that makes a difference in the lives of so many individual students and the community. I'm really pleased to be able to welcome you to our 2023 Genocide Awareness Lecture, which is presented by the Cohen Center for Holocaust and Genocide Studies. Keene State College is proud to house the center, which is an important expression of our commitment to active interdisciplinary education. As many of you know, the center plays a key role in promoting an active and informed citizenry movement that is committed to social justice and human rights. And we need that more than ever at this time in our nation's history and all the issues that we face in the global environment that we currently face. In just a moment, you will hear from the center's director, Dr. Keene State, who assumed her role in 2022, and we're so glad she's here with us. Kate is a trained anthropologist of religion with expertise in religion in the wake of mass atrocities. She holds a doctorate in religion and society from Harvard Divinity School. And the first major research project investigated memorization and meaning making in a post 9/11 New York City. Before we get to that, I think we just want to take a moment to acknowledge all of the work that the center does, the faculty and our students do every single day to advance knowledge and to create a more just society. And we're so honored that we have such amazing faculty and students who do so much every day to support one another and the mission and live our values every day. So thank you all for doing it. Kate, over to you.
Thank you for the warm welcome, Dr. Beebe, and thanks to all of you for joining us this evening for our lecture. My name is Kate State, and it's my privilege to serve as the director of the Cohen Center for Holocaust and Genocide Studies. As we begin, I want to acknowledge that Keene State College is located on the traditional ancestral homeland of the Abenaki, Pennacook, and Wabanaki peoples, past and present. We note that some of these peoples lack federal recognition and that this land remains unceded. We acknowledge and honor with gratitude this land, the waterways, and the people who have stewarded them throughout the generations. Tonight's annual Genocide Awareness Lecture dates back to 1998, and it's presented by the Cohen Center in partnership with the Department of Holocaust and Genocide Studies here at Keene State College. It's wonderful to see so many students, community members, and other friends at the center and the department in attendance, both in person and in our virtual audience as well. We ask that those of you who are joining us in person, please remember to silence your cell phones and any other devices. And we also hope that you will join us after tonight's lecture for our reception and our book signing with Omar as well. Before introducing our lecturer, I would like to extend a special word of gratitude to everyone who helped to make tonight's event possible. First, Professor Elisa von Borgi, right up here, played a key role in shaping tonight's event. It was she who first suggested that we consider inviting Omar to give this lecture. And I imagine that Omar was especially receptive to accepting this invitation given his existing friendship with Dr. Borgi. Dr. Borgi is an asset to our community here in Keene in so many ways. Numerous partners on and off campus have also contributed to the behind the scenes planning for our events with Omar this week. These include Professor Teresa Siebert, Professor Karen Jennings, Jan and Rick Cohen, Tom White, Misty Kennedy, the Office of Marketing and Communications at Keene State, and many, many others. Michelle Kiawa, who many of you met when you were checking in, deserves a special word of recognition as she has spent months working on the logistics behind Omar's visit to New Hampshire. So a huge thanks to all of you. Here's Misty, who's handling our tech for tonight. Hopefully everything's okay. Yes, you have what you need to do. This evening, we're fortunate to have Omar Ndizeye with us to deliver the 2023 Genocide Awareness Lecture. Some of you in our audience, I know, have already read Omar's memoir entitled Life and Death in Yamada, which was published in March 2020. This book tells the story of Omar's young life and his experience of surviving the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda. It was this same week, nearly 29 years ago, that many of Omar's loved ones were brutally killed, including his father and his younger brother. At the age of 10, he endured more suffering and loss than many people will see in an entire lifetime. And yet his story is also one of faith and hope in the midst of genocide. What that book does not capture, though, is all of the incredible work that Omar has gone on to do since 1994. He is currently a graduate student in genocide and mass atrocity prevention at SUNY Binghamton. However, by any measure, he is already an expert in areas such as cultural memory, societal healing, peace building, and youth engagement. Omar holds 9 years of experience working for non-government organizations in Rwanda, where he also developed a unique psychosocial program that supports genocide survivors by combining helpline services with volunteer-based first aid intervention. In collaboration with other researchers, including Professor Stephanie Wolf, Omar also continues to work on a project entitled Journey Through Rwandan Memorials. This project focuses on the 265 genocide memorials or sites of memory that exist across Rwanda. Omar's talk this evening is entitled Memory, Culture, and Emotional Expression in Post-Genocide Rwanda. Memory is also a prominent theme throughout his memoir. He writes about the intergenerational transmission of memory, as seen in how his father and others shared their refugee experiences with children in the years leading up to 1994. He also writes about traumatic memories, including the graphic scenes that haunted him long after the killing had stopped. And at the end of his book, he raises a question that has stayed in my mind ever since I first read it. He writes, quote, "How do you survive killers who hunt you in your memories?" Tonight's lecture will focus on cultural memory and the memorialization process in post-genocide Rwanda, including the role that many different actors have played in those processes. And after tonight's lecture, we hope you'll have a few minutes for Q&A time as well with both of our audiences, both in person and online. For those of you who are joining us via Zoom, you can type your questions into the Q&A box and we will do our best to address as many of those as possible. So we'll kind of toggle back and forth in person and remote questions. Now it's my pleasure to welcome Omar to the floor to deliver tonight's lecture. Omar, welcome.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you very much, Dr. K, for very wonderful words of the introduction. And you know, and everyone here today, we're very deeply honored to be here tonight. Before this in this public lecture, I talked to different people about different subjects, including students. As Kat said, that my book is a book about hope after surviving all of the genocide against Tutsi that happened in Rwanda. I think there are no exact words to thank everyone who made this session possible today, which make me very thankful and grateful to you for being here, for Professor Isa, who, as Kat said, initiated this conversation. And of course, the Cohen Center, can't forget the entire Keene State College family. Because from my conversation with the students, I had the impression that this is a family and not an institution. So since we are going to talk to reflect about culture, the law of culture and memorization, but also in the emotional expressions, I think that it is important that we take this gathering as a family gathering. Kate talked about the Holocaust I survived with my father, but I think today we are going to talk about hope. As Kate mentioned, from 2016 to 2019, I worked with Professor Stefan Wolf, whom I also told that she's part of this family. She used to be here. The people we interacted this morning, both of us agree that the world is so small. So, for some of these things to happen. The work I did with Professor Stephanie, it was a work that started when we discussed about writing an article about Nyamata. As Kate mentioned, it was before I published my memoir. At the time I was worried that the story of Nyamata will be forgotten because today's Nyamata Genocide Memorial represent its story of being a memorial. But when I went there before it became a memorial, it was a church, which means that every memorial there has two sides of a story of how people went to that memorial and how they were killed, and the story and how that story is represented. Before deepening my conversation, I want to say that it's knowledge, observation, analysis from this journey I had with Stephanie, Professor Stephanie Wolf from Weber State University today, Dr. Namari Dobia from Pretoria University in South Africa, that inspired this topic of culture. Because when we started our conversation with survivors, that time we had shifted from writing an article to write, to listen to survivors. Our questions were, who was killed here? Who killed them? How? Where were they coming from? But as we continue our journey, we visited memorial like this. This is in Nyamata. As you can see this gate here, it's where I was with my father. And we started listening different stories. We started telling the silence, the things that we needed experts to interpret. Then we would go to search people who worked on memorial in the early days to explain what we had from survivors. Then at the end, we understood that culture is an invisible driving factor of memorization. As you can see, as you may know, there are 10 stages of genocide, according to Gregory Stanton. Dr. Stanton defined the 10 stages. So while the first eight stages talks at the targeted group as a whole, the last two stages are a burden to survivors. Just to remind you that the last two stages are extermination and denial. So that survivors live alone in that isolated world of how they live that darkness of extermination. Of course, denial also goes to survivors because they keep questioning humanity. But I must again, in this conversation, it says that even though I'm talking about these stages according to Stanton, I would like to highlight the importance of validation. That's memorials. It's one of the tools that validate survivors and validate the pain, the way we represent that, the way we talk about what they lived during the genocide. Then, as you may understand, memorials in the eyes of every survivor is a tool where a survivor communicates with humanity. The people who visit memorials, the people who read, who write about memorials. That means the way we write about memorials, it tells a survivor whether we validate the pain he or she lived during the genocide, or we deny that when we question what a survivor lived. Yeah, as I said, our research kept changing, shifting from an article to memorials. Then from memorials, we started analyzing cultural driving factor of how Rwandan society built a culture of memorization. Remember, there is no precedent practices of memorization in each society because there is no society that predicts the genocide will happen in its future. When we started, we received a list of 265, as Kate mentioned. At that time, we realized that memorials are classified, are categorized in Rwanda. So we do have 4 memorials that are on the list of UNESCO. It's not yet confirmed, but there is a process of being in UNESCO World Heritage. There are 4. There are Nyamata, Bisesero Genocide Memorial in the West, Murambi Genocide Memorial, again in the South, and Kigali Genocide Memorial in Kigali, the capital city of Rwanda, for those who have never been to Rwanda. Our research followed this structure. Then there are also 8 national memorials. These are memorials managed currently by the Ministry of Unity and Civic Education before it was a National Commission of Fighting Against Genocide. There are also district memorials. When we call it this qualification, this categorization means that it means also management of those memorials as well. There are also sector memorials. But when during our visit to different hills of Rwanda, we found that there is also family graveyard that then reflect our today's topic, because it defines why some, the question we had, why some families had memorials in their homes at that time. Also from the survivors, what survivors were talking about, when they were telling us the law of memorial, they were talking about how after genocide, their emergency, their priority #1 was not about houses they lost during the genocide. It was about burying their beloved ones. Then we kept asking ourselves, why? Why that? Because some People can attribute that to the loss, others can attribute that to the trauma, but we kept asking why. I think there is a different answers, but we met Senator, the former retired Senator Mugesera Antoine. We interviewed him in 2019. Then he said, at the beginning of the 1995, people tried to bury some of their dead in their private properties, in their little properties. Often when they discovered their dead, they buried them in their private properties. But some said, put them all together. And that's not Rwanda, he said. That's not Rwanda. From his words, we got two interesting points then. Some said, put them together, and that's not Rwanda. Who said that? And why this old man thinks that that's not Rwanda? What is Rwandan in the burial process? But again, I have to precise that the genocide had also destroyed Rwandan culture, all taboos. Before genocide, it was a taboo to bury more than one people in one cemetery. Yet genocide, if you take an example of Nyamata, 10,000 people were killed in one church and their corpses were buried in one mass grave. How do you respond to that culture gap? This then take us to who prayed the law, because Mugesera here is telling us that that's not a Rwandan, but then he said that people try to tell us, put them all together. Then we are going to find that survivors, from survivors, former government officials and experts we have interviewed, we learned that the most concern for survivors was exhumation and burying corpses of the victims who were still scattered on the hills, as they said. Some of the corpses were in marshes, were left on marshes. Others were buried in mass graves. Some were left in private properties, in churches. But the concern of survivors we interviewed, from 124 genocide memorials we visited, all of them were saying, we wanted a decent burial, a burial that brings back respect to these people. Therefore, we understand that the word dehumanization of a genocide had deeply affected these survivors. Yeah, although then we found that there are also different people who supported that process, including the community. The community in Rwanda, then here I mean the returnees, the people who returned to country after 30 years in exile, mostly Tutsis, and the former perpetrators and their families, as you may know. Gacaca process proved that almost 1.9 million participated in the killings during the genocide. And if you go to Rwanda today and they ask the statistics, you see we have only 22,000 in prison. That means the rest are in the community. Of course, and then Ibrecht told us in 2018 the implication for the survivors and those who have relatives dead in the memorization process in Rwanda, turned them into civic activists who had a distinctive role in the society. Then we understand that implication of survivors, however much there is a community that's supporting them, there is a government that is supporting, giving means. There are international organizations like World Vision, UNICEF, and the others that provided money for buying different materials that they use to bury. But survivors still consider themselves at the center of burying these people, of burying their own. Of course, we kept asking why. Why survivors have this concern. Then Ngarambe Vedas, an architect, a Rwandan architect who built a memorial in the west of Rwanda, the Bisesero Genocide Memorial, then told us that traditional Rwandans used to believe in the world of the living and the world of the dead. A person didn't die, and the physical disappearance or death did not necessarily mean a complete disappearance or a death. It was a change in the state of being. That then you understand that interpretation of culture here is playing a role, is motivating these survivors to continue to bury this in a decent way. These people who, according to their culture, they think they still live with them. They want to provide a nice, a proper burial to these people who still spiritually alive. Then Gakwenzile demonstrated then that in 1995, the first step were taken towards the management of memorial site. Here we are talking about also the government role. The government, the government created the National Commission from to that office. The government created an office called the Office National de Mémoriaux du Génocide et de Massacre au Rwanda, which means National Memorial or National Office in charge of memorial and the massacre sites in Rwanda. The government of Rwanda started institutionalizing the memorization process at the time. At the time, it was under the Ministry of Education. It kept changing, tutorial ministry, from that time from the Ministry of Education to Ministry of Sports and Culture, from Ministry of Sports and Culture to Ministry of Justice, from Ministry of Justice to the current Ministry of Youth and Civic Education. Then if we are deepening the role of government in this process, and we can start saying that it was institutionalizing the memory first, but also supporting, financing the whole process, because there is also financial needs in that. Third, there is also developing policies in this new society that had inherited genocide. Then, of course, also filmmakers and others were interested, and writers, scholars started doing research on Rwanda. All of these people who are involved in the memorization, they also influenced the way the memory was developed in Rwanda. As you can see in these two photos, the two photos you are seeing in front of you, you are seeing spears and a big log on one photo, and displays of words and photos in the second photo. The first photo is a Bisesero Genocide Memorial built by Vedas Ngarambe, I mentioned. Second is the Kigali Genocide Memorial developed by Aegis Trust, which is a UK-based organization. But very specifically, this memorial was built by the two Smith brothers, Stephen Smith and James Smith. If I'm mentioning these two people, then it's to also observe the difference of the two structures. First, structure built by a Rwandan, look how the imagination is. Second, memorial built by the British and American, look, then the introduction of writing in the memorization process, which means there is merging of Western knowledge and the traditional Rwandan knowledge. Which means that then, if we are moving forward, we need to recognize this presentation of a history. We need to recognize the traditional knowledge, because according to Vedas, when he was explaining this, he said that there are some steps, you can't see them. There are some steps that you need to print, and automatically when you are live here, there is a thing that looks like a triumph, arc of triumph. Because I told myself, he was telling us, I told myself that life has triumphed over death. Because after genocide, I'm convinced, he said, that life, even though killers wanted to exterminate these people, but they failed to do so. That's why at the entrance of this memorial, see arc of triumph. You are seeing Dennis Spears and look what he said. What I wanted was to immortalize the elements of resistance, because this is the biggest resistance that happened during the genocide, where species of Tutsis from species resisted to free government military barracks attack, and the inherent from free prefecture. Prefecture in the structure of the United States is like a state at the time. I wanted to immortalize them. Say that means then, if you visit memorials in Rwanda, every detail counts. But again, we need to recognize also the contribution of two brothers, Smith, the writings, because according to Vedas, even though there are no writings in his designed memorial, he still believed that a memorial should tell a story. Therefore, the first memorial tell a story in a Rwandan way. Second memorial tell a story in a Western way. Therefore, we need both. Again, during our travel, I mean our field research, I realized that the attachment. I observed the attachment that survivors had on killing sites, which a French historian, Pierre Nola, called sites of memory. One survivor from here in the southwest of Rwanda, in this triangle at the border of Rwanda and the Burundi, and in a place called the Bugarama, said, I call water the tomb of our relatives, because it is where their last breath were taken and thrown into the river. I also say that I'm healed because now I know that place. River, Rusizi River, at the time he was mentioning, is a memorial to me, because I know that it is where exactly my family members were thrown. We would have been happy to find their bodies and bury them, but at least we know the place where we go to mourn them. It is where Rusizi River, he mentioned, I go during commemoration. When I ask during commemoration, other people go to memorials. For him, he goes to the river. I go during commemoration to remember my siblings, my children. It is this place where I go to mourn my parents, my wife. He said. Therefore, you understand that the killing sites are also very important. For those who are interested to do research on Rwanda, we need to deeply study the transition from killing site during the burial process to memorials. We have it today. Today, the government of Rwanda is having a merging of memorials. But for survivors like Ibafakulela, who shared this story, those sites still the most important to them. So then I developed a map. This is a map I developed because I have observed people like him, survivors like him, a map which shows all these sites. As you can see, there are 127 churches, 48 among them being Catholic Church for a reason. because majority of Rwandans were believing in the Catholic Church. Of course, church was also a sacred place before genocide. People were expecting a safety. I'm not sure if it still is. But also people were expecting safety in the government structures, in the government premises, schools, health facilities. As you can see, 207 presented on this map I have developed are also killing sites. As you heard from Bafakulela, then this is not, it doesn't represent them all, because the water you see on this map are also sites of memory. Therefore, what else, another element I need to mention here is that stories of survivors and the sites of memory tells us how genocide happened. For example, if you go in this part of southwest of Rwanda, and this part of here in the eastern province called Rwamagana, and the first province is the first district is Nyamasheke, and the Rwamagana district, you find that the women and the girls were put aside before they killed men and the young boys. Again, we asked them why, and we found that then they were telling us that in traditional Rwandans, during the unification of the country, then women and the children were spared during wars. Then there is also an element of culture during the genocide, except the difference is that women here, they were put in the house and they were burnt, while women in Rwamagana, they were turned into sexual slaves. This brings us to this photo. These two photos, you can see a mass grave at the Nyamasheke Catholic Church in the west of Rwanda, a survivor at the Kabarondo in the east of Rwanda. Here, you can see, then we say that genocide is a total dehumanization, total destruction, and emotional torture. That means our writings about the genocide, our reflection about the genocide, it's about this in the eyes of the survivor. It's about the pain they suffered. It's about the scars it left. It's about this treatment of bodies. Since our conversation today is about culture and the memory, the role of memory, the role of culture and memory, and emotional expressions, survivors we interviewed or you encountered, you saw that we talk about cows. We talk about cows here. This is these are cows. This is a photo we took at Ntarama in the east of Rwanda. There is a marshes, Ntarama marshes. There are a lot of Tutsis that were killed here because it is their water. They are still there. So survivors every year goes to this place to mourn them. There is no way to remove them at this place. This is a story itself. When survivors share that story, they are sharing this. Many survivors say they killed us and our cows. But also survivors share, when they talk about their stories, they also share the weapons used to kill. Additional weapons, they cut them with machete. Then they talk about the family members who are killed. It's in psychology, we have something called here and now. Some people, when they hear this story with cows, with arms, weapons, people are going to spend much time here. Yet cows in Rwandan culture, there is a reason that the survivors is sharing this. It means they killed our precious things. Therefore, our interpretation of genocide needs to be more inclusive. We need to be attentive and make sure that these cultural elements, when they are shared by survivors, they are communicating more than a death. It's about how they were killed. It's about what they lost. It's about the people, the life they lost. This again took us to the languages. You know, most survivors before genocide, some of those who were educated, they were speaking French. Majority were speaking Kinyarwanda, because before genocide, there is a quota system where 10% of Tutsis were not allowed to, Tutsis were not allowed to exceed the 10% in the schools, all schools. If you read the 10 Hutu commandments, you find that first free commandment are about women, about the supremacy of Hutu women over Hutu Tutsi women. And they are radicalizing Hutu women, telling them, watch out your husband, prevent them to be corrupted by Tutsis. You are so beautiful than them. But if you read the 10 Hutu commandments, again, from 4 to 7, we are going to find about positions, military positions, security organizations. These should be exclusively Hutu for Hutus. Again, that means that a language then played the role in killing. During the genocide, the killing was not called, in the mobilizing killers, it was not called killing, it was called working. There is an element of language. Rwandans didn't have a lot of expression tools, art of expression like we have in Western societies, where we have a very performative culture, which are the theaters, sculptures, drawings, and all those. Rwandan traditional society didn't have that. Rwandans would paint everything in a language. That means also survivors are going to tell their testimonies in painting, art of telling a story, art of expression. They are going to use idioms, proverbs, and some of them, they don't have equivalent in English. Therefore, how much is distorted and misinterpreted? Therefore, if we are studying memory and memorization in a country like Rwanda, then we need to keep in mind that it's translated into English memory. Then if we are investing more, then how we can invest also in understanding keywords in Kinyarwanda, keywords of memory. If there is a linguistic person here, that's a future good research. But there are also muted voices, what we call muted voices. Some women left during the genocide we have interviewed. They had stories, but when they reached where they were left during the genocide, they would stay silent. When they cry, some of the time, expressions. And then when they restart after crying, when you use logic, the story is not connected. For example, this woman in West told us, 4 men took me in a small house at the backyard. She paused and cried. After 2 days, I left that small house. What happened with those 4 men? When did those 4 men went out? But again, Karin Drumel from Colorado say that some words are hard, some crimes are hard to tell in their own native language. Sex in Rwanda is a sacred thing to talk about in public. That means then some of these women are still muting that part where they were left. Rwandan society is patriarchal society. Men traditionally think that their role is to protect children and women. Then for survivors men, they think that they failed to protect their wives and their daughters. But also it's still a big shame for those who did that. As you can see on the photo, it's a Millian, well-known psychotherapist who helped a lot. She's still working, it's still helping survivors. But these are the new invented ways of healing. There is Susanna Nyiranyamibwa, who came to Rwanda after genocide. Her family had lived in exile. Then she had contributed a lot during the Liberation War. She had contributed a lot of nice songs, you know, mobilizing people. We are going back to our own country, the beautiful country, which is Rwanda. But when she reached to Rwanda, her songs are going to be different from that time. Munyeshoza, another singer who was born in the west of Rwanda, he is the one who kind of invented a way of putting names in his songs. Then now he's asked by different survivors to sing about their region and put names. Again, that oral culture is manifested here. That means if you are doing research on memorization, the memorials in Rwanda, then songs is a source. Alice. So then here you find also mourning rituals, since we are talking about cultures, symbols in post-genocide Rwanda. As you can see on the first photo, there are mass grave in a place called the Bukonya, Gakenke district. There is a firewood or the gihito in Rwanda. This is the first photo. This is how traditional, before genocide, Rwandans would accompany someone, a family that lost a person. So this is a traditional, traditional practice. But as I said, genocide then became very extraordinary in a society, a very burden. Until now, society still finding in a spontaneous way how to deal with this past. That's why then night vigil, which is also a traditional practice, is going to be at national level. So we used to have a community vigil, night vigil, where neighbors would come to support a family that lost a person. Now we are having people full of stadium in night vigil. Again, there is a development. The world is too demanding. They are going to shift. They are going to keep shifting. As Rwanda was continued to build a culture of memorization, as I mentioned, there is also a spontaneity, also a shift from 1994, from the use of firewood to the use of candle, or from the use of symbols, of right symbols, to the flame of eternal remembrance, which is now at the Ndizeye Genocide Memorial. As we remember, we talked about the things that the Ndizeye Genocide Memorial introduced in Rwandan society, then you can understand that from here, from firewood, Gihito, to frame of eternal memory, there is a merging of a traditional Rwandan way and the Western way to create some lasting practices. In the words of former Minister and Ambassador Nsengimana, who worked on memorization process in the early days, in the early years, 1995, 1994, He said, I remember when we began to mourn, to bury, we discussed of how Rwandan mourned. As I was representing the culture of mourning, I told them the way it is done is that the people assembled around the fire, and I was telling them that we need to keep it. It will not be exactly the same, he recognized. A firewood, but we need to keep that element. The people after the passing away of their loved person, they are together around fire. They are together around the fire. They are together around fire. So the fire has, it's a symbol of assembling, a warming, and warming the family which has lost the dear one. The symbol we have at the memorial here, the symbols we have at the memorial, you have seen at the time he was telling us, the symbol you have seen at the memorials of the 1994 genocide against Tutsi in Rwanda, it's just a light of frame, but it's an idea, comes from the firewood where people have assembled any building. It's just modernized, but building it from the reality of memorial. He said, he is the first minister who dealt with the memorization. And you can understand, it's not by accident that today Rwandan society is developed this. Of course, with interaction of people, experts on Holocaust. After genocide, they invited Holocaust survivors, Armenian survivors, and the other survivors who survived the mass atrocities, just to learn how can we fill the gaps of our culture. Then, as Nshimiyimana said in 2017, he said that the right specific to mourning could not be respected. Therefore, the mission, he said, were then instituted, followed by reinterment, which dignified, accompanied the funeral rituals. Because the way the killers had thrown the victims into mass graves, into rivers, were not respecting the cultural ways of funeral. Then that's why the society reintroduced the burial process. As I conclude, I ask this question. Today's scholarship is about genocide prevention. We talk about upstream, midstream, downstream. Where is the place of culture in this process? Why do you think culture matters? Let me use the words of Martin Danto before I conclude. He said that we elect monuments so that we shall always remember, and build memorials so that we shall never forget. Monuments commemorate the memorable and embody the myths of the beginnings. Memorials ritualize the remembrance and mark the reality of ends. Therefore, as you reflect on 10 stages, according to Gregory Stanton, they started. And these genocide prevention revolts, downstream, mainstream, upstream. Let's always try to understand that mourning rituals has a central place in the way every society expresses itself. Rituals in different societies are practices to remember the past for the other different reasons. Then, as our conversation is centered about genocide prevention, through analyzing the role of culture, let's always remember that survivors from all mass atrocities, they seek validation from every person they meet in the humanity family. Therefore, as we debate about genocide prevention, let's always also debate about validating the pain, the suffering that survivors inherited, the wounds they had, that will help us to hold the past accountable. Then we can understand, we can conclude by saying that culture matters in prevention because it helps us to pay attention to every detail that survivors used to tell us a story, every detail on how memorials are built, every detail on how people from different societies write their stories, every detail from how survivors from different societies present the memory of what happened to them. As we have seen, then what we learn from Rwandan society is that merging traditional knowledge to the modern knowledge helps society to deal with cultural gaps, which is a starting point for genocide prevention. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Omar. What an incredible lecture. I think I speak for all of us in just expressing gratitude for you, for your time, for your expertise, for these beautiful images that you put together for us to think through. We had intended to do a Q&A for a little bit, but we're at 6:30 now. So what I'm thinking might work well, because we have our reception built in right after this, is just to move downstairs and continue our conversation there. We didn't have any questions from our virtual audience, so that's okay. But right downstairs, we're gonna have for the next 45 minutes or so, a beautiful reception. It's a chance for you to chat with Omar some more, to have your books signed if you have books or if you want to purchase books. Does that sound okay to everyone? I think we can kind of just keep the conversation flowing that way. But thank you again, Omar. Let's give him another hand.